Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Greetings, my name is Emily Srimbarurandi along with Jalila P. Batara. We'll be talking about language, gender, and identity. The importance of this video is for us to understand gender, sex, and sexuality. Here we will explore the role of language, concentrating on the relation between gender and language. Language and gender have an interdependent relationship influencing our social behavior both as an individual and as society as a whole. Today, we will learn about the relation between gender and language. But first, let us define what language is. Language is a system of conventional spoken, manual sign, or written symbols by means of which human beings, as member of a social group and participant in its culture, express themselves. The function of language includes communication, the expression of identity, play, imaginative expression, and emotional release. And so, language is the expression of ideas by means of speech sounds combined into words, and words are combined into sentence, and this combination enters into that of ideas into thoughts.
While gender identity is one's innermost concept of self as male, female, a blend of both, or neither. It is how individuals perceive themselves and what they call themselves. One's gender identity can be the same or different from their sex assigned at birth. Gender identity is how a person feels and who they know themselves to be when it comes to their gender. There are more than two genders. Even though in our society the genders that are most recognized are male and female, called the gender binary, and usually is based on someone's anatomy. Anatomy means the genitals they were born with. This is gender assignment, and it is based on an assumption that someone's genital match their gender. However, gender isn't about someone's anatomy. It is about who they know themselves to be. There are many different gender identities, including male, female, transgender, gender neutral, non-binary, agender, pangender, genderqueer, and etc. There are a variety of genders, and I'm giving you 4. The first one was the transgender, wherein it is an umbrella term that encompasses all people who experience and identify with different gender than that which their assigned sex at birth would suggest. For example of this transgender was Binibining Gandang Hari. I bet each of you was familiar with this person or a celebrity. He is the brother of Robin Padilla, and he used to be Rostom Padilla during the early 1990s. Then the second one was the non-binary. A person who identifies as non-binary does not experience gender within the gender binary. People who are non-binary may also experience overlap with different gender expressions, such as being gender non-conforming. When we say binary, it is the male or female gender. The example of this was Miley Cyrus. I guess each of you was familiar with this celebrity also. Then agender. A person who is agender does not identify with any particular gender, or they may have no gender at all. They are still confused or still searching for themselves if they have genders. If they do possess or if they do feel something within themselves, they are still searching for their genders. And then the last one was the genderqueer, which is a person who identifies as genderqueer, has a gender identity or expression that is not the same as society's expectations for their assigned sex or assumed gender. The example of this was Weisganda. He is not a transgender, he is not a woman, he is not a man. Well, he is a gender queer. He is not a she, he is not a he. He is a gender queer. Language and gender refers to the relationship between the language of male and female. Gender differences are not only a reflection of the speeches between male or female, but also a reflection of their different living lifestyles and studies.
Another example of gendered language is the way titles Mr., Miss, and Mrs. are used. Mr. can refer to any man regardless of whether he is single or married, but Miss and Mrs. define women by whether they are married, which until quite recently meant defining them by their relationships with men. And now, let us look at a few words of the English language which describes the specific gender. Postman, housewife, chairman, sportsman. These words create an inherent bias in the language which gives the job of chairing something, handling post or sports to men, and that of handling the house to women. This is an example of language creating gender stereotypes. What gender comes to your mind when you hear the words doctor, nurse, professor, and secretary? These words are all in fact gender neutral, but our social biases make us inclined to think that doctor is a male, while nurse might align to a female identity in our heads. This is how gender might affect our language, and there are multiple interesting studies which have dealt with these things in depth. Once, a study involved a group of German and Spanish speakers. Now, both these languages do not have a neutral gender. The groups will ask to assign properties to non-living objects like key. Key is a masculine noun in German and feminine in Spanish. Interestingly, German speakers assign properties like hard, heavy, metal, jagged, serrated, useful, while Spanish begged gold, intricate, little, lovely, shiny, and tiny. A much debated topic, especially by the feminists, is that of male being the norm. For example, a student walked into the class. He picked up the book. In this sentence, your student is a gender-neutral noun. In case if the gender is not known, a default male gender is signed by using the pronoun he. We have seen other such examples like policeman, fireman, milkman, etc., where the word man is used to represent all. Another sentence. All men are mortal. Julia is a man, therefore Julia is a mortal. This practice can make women invisible in language or altogether excludes them. In the postmodern era, feminists have achieved the use of the more gender-neutral suffix of person instead of man, so you might now find that it is inappropriate to address anyone as a chairman and not a chairperson. These biases are deeply entrenched and make way into gender discrimination in workforce, households, and relationships. This, along with the greater visibility of genderqueer, third gender, transgender, etc., make us think if gender-neutral language is the need of their hour.
Did you know that men and women use language differently? Well, the reasons are biological, cultural, political, economical, and many more. Did you also know that studies on language and gender started in 1970s with the book written by Robin Lacouf on language and woman's place? Well, now you know. Did you also know that women use endearing words and make use of styles more than men? It supports studies about the nature of women. Did you also know that in some cultures, women have an entirely different language from men's language? Women can speak the same language as men. Maybe you wonder how do they communicate with the opposite sex? Well, did you also know that women conduct more study on language and gender than men? Those women are usually feminist because most of those studies are based on the preservation of the female gender. Did you also know that it is possible to identify the sex of a handwritten text of an anonymous person? Well, psychologists are in charge of this field. Did you also know that women make use of questions more frequently than men? It isn't a crime. Knowledge is power. Did you also know that women engage more in self disclosure than men? They tend to talk more about their feelings than men do. Maybe that is the reason why they get hurt easily. And did you also know that masculine words are used to refer to an anonymous person, even if that person is female? Except if the population is females only. And lastly, did you know that women talk more than men? Well, it is a little obvious, isn't it?